Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Severson, and I'm going to present the Air Canada Case Study Project Plan. So, an overall for the table of contents, what we're going to look at is identifying some of the issues with Air Canada, both main and underlying, and then we'll move into ways of improvement, and we're mainly focusing and looking at the timeline of the project, plans of action. We'll move on to our SWOT analysis for Air Canada, and then some benefits predicted and who they will impact. Looking at the main issue Air Canada is facing, it's bankruptcy and forced liquidation by a certain date. So that's the main overall issue that I can see in Air Canada. But that alone didn't just happen. There was some internal issues that caused the bankruptcy filing. Collaboration and communication were the large factors for why the decision didn't get made before Air Canada was forced to file for bankruptcy with the CCA. There were issues, union and management conflict, loss of market power, and then that caused a delayed decision making, kind of both those factors. We're looking at the initial view where Air Canada could see that there was some issues underlying specifically in their financial statement. So this statement is from 2000 to 2002, and what we're looking at mostly is their income loss for the year. So in 2000, it was still overriding the revenues, but only by 36. There's a huge jump to the next year, 2001, where it jumps to 1,300. So that's where there's an issue, because it jumps so high in 1 year, and to the point where 2002, it's still high. It has decreased subtly, but only to 800, so it is still fairly high. And they can't run those stakes for long with the expenses overtaking the revenue in such that drastic pattern. If we're looking at the expenses specifically and which expenses are affecting the revenue the most, what's the most expensive for Air Canada? It's salary and wages, aircraft fuel, and then aircraft rent. And from my opinion, from what I can see, the reason we're going towards cutting costs in labor and layoffs is because salary and wages won't directly impact the revenue like aircraft rent and aircraft fuel would. So I think they're looking to go around affecting the already not very profitable revenue, and they're trying to focus on decreasing the expenses in the salary and wages to make the revenue higher than the expenses. We're going to move on to ways of improvement. We're going to look at the timeline of the project. So this is based on the year 2003, so we're going to restart negotiations April. They filed for bankruptcy in April, so they're restarting the negotiation, opening communication between both sides, between unions and Air Canada, trying to get a decision made, specifically made before May 31st. Specifically, May 31st that's when the courts will force liquidation if there's not a decision made. So they're wanting to have a decision agreed upon that has both the unions and Air Canada in mind. So they want to streamline their goals for the company together, so using both collaboration. And after that hard deadline of the 31st June, we're looking to implement the decision. So we're looking for plans of increasing our market shares and cutting costs in labor specifically. And then looking into the future, 2004, we're looking to improve any outliers that can be caused negatively to the decision. So we're looking at something that wasn't there when we made the decision. We're going to improve upon the decision made to grow from the decision. Any outliers that don't really mesh well. Let's look at the SWOT analysis and plans of action. So plans of action, similar to what I said in the timeline, 3 main ones: improved communication, agree on a decision, and implement the decision. So if they can communicate both sides, the decision-making process will speed up, and that will make a more cohesive decision because you're having both sides input that they're looking to get one streamlined opinion that will fit and benefit both parties over time. The SWOT analysis, some of the strengths for Air Canada are the fact that the Canadian market, they have a large portion of the Canadian market, it being Canadian airline. So they have lots of access to Canadian passengers. That's their domain. That's one strength. A weakness is expenditures. So the costs are overtaking the revenue profit at the moment. So they're looking to decrease the costs, increase the revenue. That's one weakness. Opportunities is market shares. So they lost market shares during the issues previous and during bankruptcy. So they're looking to take back those market shares, improve their standing in the market. The threats, and I think the most important threat, is conflict. So if Air Canada and the unions cannot make a cohesive decision together by May 31st, the company will be liquidated. So that's a big threat for if they cannot collaborate together productively, that's where the company will end up. So that's one big threat. And that's what needs to be improved upon. Like I said, market shares were taken from Air Canada. Specifically, WestJet took up some of those market shares. And if we're going to compare Air Canada and WestJet, which Air Canada and WestJet are competitors, we're going to look at where Air Canada is kind of less than to WestJet. So you can already see that there's an issue with some of the total revenues, but also we're going to look at percent revenue. That's our main thing. We're looking at the percentage. Not only does WestJet have a 10% higher revenue, they have a 10% lower expenditures. So that alone is kind of, they're making a profit still, even though their revenue is lower. They're making a profit. Air Canada specifically, if we're looking at salary and wages, WestJet has half of the expenses that Air Canada does, or near to half. Yeah, and those are some of the issues with Air Canada specifically when you're comparing them to WestJet. Let's look at some of the benefits predicted and who is impacted. So increased revenue. Overall, Air Canada wants to increase their revenue to help combat their expenses. And they're going to try and do that with some acquisitions. They're going to change some of the management, reorganize the behavior of the company, and maybe do some new channels. But mainly they want to increase sales and increase their margin. Reduced costs. This is the overall where they want to hit Air Canada's expenses with. They want to decrease labor cost. And I think they could look at automation, technology, reorganization. Those specifically kind of counteract and readjust the organization. So FTE, full-time employee savings, that's an example. And then reduced fraud, greater accuracy, and faster processes. Market shares, as I said earlier, Air Canada lost some of the portion of the market when they were fighting with the overall expenditure and revenue issues. So they're looking to take back some of the market shares, and they're going to do that through greater autonomy of decision making. So they're going to streamline their decisions with the unions and Air Canada itself. So they're wanting to get one cohesive decision and then greater economies of scale. Employee satisfaction. This is kind of one that's looking into the future. So once kind of the initial hardship of cutting jobs and layoffs in labor, cutting costs in labor, eventually it will get to the point where once Air Canada builds itself back out of bankruptcy, we can start looking at employee satisfaction being a benefit. So employee attitude to work and organizational environment, like I said, once you build it back up, employee satisfaction, and then improved employer brand engagement, improved reputation. Improved reputation is a big one. We want Air Canada to bring back kind of its standing in Canadian market rather than where it is in bankruptcy, and bring up the stocks as well. And then improved productivity overall. Who the benefits will affect. So we're looking at Air Canada as a whole. We're hoping that all of the benefits will have some effect to all tiers of the organization, that being the company's standing, its reputation, the managerial impacts and benefits, employee benefits, unions, consumers, etc. We're looking for a trickle-down effect where all the benefits will have some effect on everyone in the organization that's centered around the organization. Benefits are expected to impact all aspects of the company, as I've said. And here's my works cited. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to the project plan for Air Canada.